how do we keep healthy as we get older. In other words, what are the things that we have to do? So therefore, live long and prosper is what we're trying to do. I guess the live long part is what I'm doing. The prosper part, you guys will have to figure out with your financial consultants. And I like this sign because even the Queen was using this sign as well. And she did live a good long life. She was very productive to the very end. And I think we need to look at some of these people that have led good long lives and what did they do special? And you remember that she didn't have a crazy diet. She sort of stuck with certain foods that she was doing. She always kept busy. She always had purpose in life. In other words, she didn't sit around. She was always doing something. So those might be some of the key things that we have to keep an eye on. One of the things I want to show you is this. So in the olden days, we used to die of dirty water. So infection was a big problem that we had in the 1920s. And so when public health came in and started to give us clean drinking water, separating the sewage water from our clean drinking water, a lot of people live longer. However, as we lived longer and we were more prosperous after the war, then all of a sudden we found different diseases. So instead of infectious diseases, we found diseases of this kind of stuff. Now, we haven't seen President Obama for a little while. So I wanted to show you what he looks like now. You know, after his vacation, he looks something like this. So now we're talking about obesity and diabetes, like diseases of plenty. So remember, our body was designed when there was not a lot of food around. So therefore, our body is able to make do with whatever it can find. And therefore, it's always conserving, always very frugal. However, now we have plenty of food, okay? And it might not be the best food, but unfortunately, because we have plenty of food, your body is still frugal. So therefore, it'll keep saving and saving and saving. Now, if this was money, that'd be great if you could be saving for your retirement. But unfortunately, this is fat and that causes lots of diseases as well. And so we do have fancy equipment. This is the UHN down in Toronto. And this is a fancy operating room where they have a CT scan machine built in so they can scan you and then operate at the same time. So therefore, they can save your life. So there are many of these things. But really, that's not how we want to live long, right? We don't want to live long with lots of diseases. Ideally, we have no diseases. And then maybe on the last day, you get every disease. That would be perfect, right? So on the last day, you get everything, chicken pox, everything, and then you're done. That would be very nice. So therefore, there's no suffering for the 90 or 100 years before that. But unfortunately, we don't know exactly how to do that. What we can do is perhaps avoid some diseases and therefore lead a good long life without any complications. And then if you live long enough, unfortunately, right now, you have the risk of having cancer as well. So we survived the infections, then we survived the heart attacks and blood pressure issues and diabetes and obesity issues. And now we qualify for cancer. And then if you get past that age category, then we have to worry about the memory going, you know, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, those kinds of things. But not to worry, as the people start to go through those sections, then medicine and science will start trying to figure that out. So even right now, there's a lot of advancement in cancer, for example. How can we detect it earlier? How can we treat it? And so on and so forth. And now we're starting into the dementia area where how can we detect it earlier? How can we treat it? So as the population moves to different diseases, the science is trying to keep up and making sure that we have treatments for them. So let's go back here. So this is your lifetime. Okay. So hopefully we don't have to all use a cane. It would be nice if we can keep walking. But I found a funnier version of this one. And it was looking something like this. It says, you know, sex, 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 money, 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 toilet, toilet, toilet as you get older and older. So in other words, our priorities are changing over time. And so notice in there, nowhere does it say health, health, health. So sometimes we're always chasing something. We're chasing the money, the job, and things like that. You guys are very busy with the foundation that you're working on. But the key thing is we need to also pay attention to our health, because if we stay healthy, then we can continue to do that nice work for other people as well. And one area that I'm going to keep referring to are these blue zones, where these are areas in the world where people live 10 times longer than normal. In other words, there are more people over 100 years old than in any other places in the world by about 10 times. So these areas are called blue zones. And it was because of this guy from the National Geographic, and he was trying to figure out what's special about these areas that they would have these very long living people. And so he took a blue marker and he circled out these cities that he was going to visit. And because he used a blue marker, they were then called blue zones. So that's, if you ever read about blue zones, that's where the name came from, was just because he used a blue marker there. There's nothing special about the color blue. And so what they did was they looked at these people and they tried to figure out what they do. And so they published this thing, The Secrets of Long Life. And there's a lot of photos in here. I'll just show you quickly. There's a lot of communities. You know how you're a community, and people being together is very helpful. So in other words, by yourself, you don't live as long as if you're part of a community. People stay active. So this fellow was, doing his work. And the reporter came up to him and said, why are you doing this? Because he was trying to fix a fence. And so the reporter said, why are you doing this? And the guy looked at him and said, because the fence is broken, right? So in other words, he didn't understand why the guy was talking. And this guy is 101 years old and he's fixing the fence. So in his mind, fixing the fence is part of his purpose in life. And so therefore they keep busy with doing these things. There's the whole fence once he finished with it. And then you have them doing exercises like this, and you have them diving into the pool like young kids. And so therefore they're enjoying life. And then one thing that they notice is that there's a lot of community. So they eat together, they cook together, and that seems to be binding them together. It gives them a purpose to live. So purpose to go out and do things, people around you that you care about and that care about you, seems to be something that's very special. So there's no special medication that they're taking, no special herbal, there's no special exercise. In fact, none of these people do exercise. They just stay busy all day long. So either cooking, cleaning, making fences, doing chores is their way of staying active. So they do not do 1 hour of exercise or anything like that. And Andy was asking me a question, what kind of exercise should we do? Should we really be doing 1 hour of exercise or half an hour of exercise? And then the rest of the 23 hours or so, we don't do anything and sit there in front of a computer? The answer is no. So we're going to talk about how we stay active, and then therefore we can lead a good, healthy life. They tried to look at these different places like Japan, Italy, and California to see what's the same about these people. So some eat nuts and things like that. So some people do other things, but there's some common areas that are the same. So generally not a whole lot of meat. So it's sort of plant-based, constant activity, social engagement, lots of vegetables, legumes, that kind of thing, and lots of family that's there, and no smoking. So you can see that those seem to be the commonalities of these places. And so perhaps those are the core things that are keeping these people living long, because genetically they're not related, right? So somebody from Italy is not the same as somebody from Japan in terms of how they were made, but their lifestyle seems to make them live long in all these different countries. We know about SARS, COVID, and we know that infections can wipe out a large population. And that's basically what we saw this time with the pandemic, is that a virus can get into your body and cause a lot of damage. And really, it's not the virus causing damage, it's your body attacking the virus, trying to get rid of it, that seems to be doing all of the damage. And in some people, that attack is very, very violent. And so therefore, they end up on the ventilators and things like that. So we do have to worry about infectious diseases. And even though I said we got rid of the clean water and the dirty water business, that was water-based infections. These are now airborne-based infections that we have to be careful about. So therefore, even though you could lead a very, very healthy life, we still have to be careful about it getting exposed to these kind of exposures. And how do we do that now? Because many places are not masking. I just tell people, just hold your breath, like, so when you're walking past somebody and it's a crowded space, just hold your breath while you walk through that little corridor. If you're going to go into a crowded place like an airplane or a train where you cannot hold your breath for 3 hours, then a mask might be a useful thing to cut down your exposure risk as well. And when you're eating with people, just sit a little further apart, and just remember you have to suck the virus in order to pick it up. We are seeing a lot of transmission in children. So the children get it from the school, and then they bring it back home to the parents and grandparents that are looking after them. And so therefore, if you're going to hug your grandchildren or children, just hold your breath while you're hugging them. I know it sounds crazy, but when you're close to them, that's when you do not want to be sucking in the air. And the other thing is the bottom of the backpack. So the bottom of the backpack has a lot of germs because it's sitting on the floor. And so therefore, if you touch the bottom of your backpack, do not put your hands up to your face, because then you'll bring the virus to your nose. So all the viruses cannot do anything in your hand, but once you bring it up to your face and you breathe it in, then that's when they can do all this exciting stuff. So these very simple things, we can actually take care of many of the infections. So we don't have to be crazy like where you're wiping down your fruits and your vegetables, but we just take care in these particular situations. Falls is another problem that we have. Okay. So, and I must admit, this is me. So I fell, I hit the patch of ice in 2010 and basically my leg went up and my ankle cracked. And so therefore I was in a cast and I had screws and all those other things. So fall prevention is very important. So therefore, as we get older, our balance is not so good. So we have our inner ear that helps us balance. So when you close your eyes, there's a lot of signals coming to your brain to tell you that you're still standing straight. Some of it is from your inner ear. Some of it is from your feet. Your feet will know whether you're leaning to one side or the other. So that's how your brain gets information. And of course, your eyes will tell you whether it's a balance or not. As we get older, those sensors may not be as good. And so therefore, even if we're a little bit tilted, we might not know. So therefore, your balance may be a little bit off. So therefore, as we get older, it's easier to fall. So if there's just a little uneven surface on the road, then your foot is going this way, but you can't correct it fast enough, and then you'll topple over. So that's why as we get older, we have to make sure that we don't fall. And so what you want to do is just pay attention to when you're walking. So when you're young, you can rush. And even if you trip, you can catch yourself. As you get older, if you trip, you're not going to be able to recover, and then you're going to end up on the floor. So a couple of things happen. You break your wrist. That's very common. Or if worst case scenario, you break your hip, in which case the people that have broken hip, in about 2 years, about half of them are dead. So therefore, a broken hip is very bad because you can't move. There's a lot of complications that come with it. So that's why we don't want to have any fractures if we can. So therefore, that's one thing that we can prevent. And of course, climbing up on ladders, stairs is another thing, and ice. So when there's winter time and there's wet stuff, that's going to be a problem. I stepped on black ice. So it was basically ice with a little bit of water on top. So you think it's water, but when you step on it, there's ice underneath. And then basically I slipped, and that's how I broke my ankle and had this crazy cast looking. Oh, remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? You know, that was then, you know, he says, I'll be back. And then now 40 years later, he looks like this. It's more like, oh, my back. Okay. So as we get older, we lose muscle mass. So therefore his muscle mass is still really good, but compared to this one, it's going to be less. So if we look at the older population, their muscles become more and more weak. So one of the tests that we do is called the get up and go test. So this is where you stand up from a chair, you walk 10 feet, you turn around, and then you come back, and then you sit back down in the chair. And you could do this with your elderly relatives or anything like that. And what you're looking for is wobbling. So can they get up out of the chair? When they walk, are they steady, or are they kind of swaying? And when they turn, are they kind of a little bit wobbly? And when they come and sit back down, is it a nice controlled sit down, or are they just going plump where they drop? Because if they're dropping, then a lot of times they're not going to hit the toilet, right? So when they go down to go on the toilet, there's going to be a chance that they slip off the side of the toilet. And in the washroom, there's a lot of things to hit your head on. So therefore, on yourself, on your loved ones, just do the get up and then walk, and then turn around and then come sit back down. And it's a very good test to see whether people are going to fall or not. And if we can prevent the fall, then it's going to be good. So if you are a little bit wobbly, then this is when we put in those grab bars in the bathroom. So therefore you have places where your hands can grab and therefore help yourself, so that it's not all your leg muscles that are doing the standing up and sitting down. Osteoporosis is what we call the silent sort of thief. So it's stealing your bones. And the reason why people get hunched over, you know, the little popo, it becomes more crunched over, is because the bones that are like little bricks, the bones are becoming thin. So the bones itself become thin. And so what you end up happening is, this is good bone. Okay. There's the disc. This is not so good bone. And this is broken bone. And so as we get older, basically the bone becomes nice and strong, and then becomes weaker, and then it starts to crack. So once it cracks, then we would call it secondary prevention, meaning you had a fracture already. And then before your fracture, this would be primary prevention. You're trying to prevent the event from happening. This one it's already happened. So when you see people getting hunched over like that, we know for sure that these bones are already crushing down. So that's a sign that there are already little fractures happening in the spine. And sometimes that explains some of the back pain that people have, because every time you crush it down, the bone isn't broken. It's not broken like your hand, right? If your hand is broken, like you can't move it, this is just crushing down. And so therefore you can still move and function, but you'll have a lot of pain in your back. So therefore we pay attention to these things. And what we want to do is we want you to take vitamin D, which helps you to absorb calcium. We would like you to take some calcium as well. And we want you to do some exercises so that it pulls on the bone. So if you have muscle pulling on the bone, then it's more likely to stay like this than become all holy. Whereas if you just lie there and do nothing, then the bones will become, holy. And the reason for that is very simple. Remember what I said, the body is very good at conserving. So if you don't need that bone, it wants to take the structure back and then use the raw material somewhere else. So if you don't use that bone, it's going to take back the calcium and then use it somewhere else. Because in nature, when we were animals, we didn't have a lot of calcium and fuel and everything else. So therefore, we're always trying to conserve. And in fact, this is one of the problems that NASA is having, so when they send the astronauts to Mars, which is going to take a year or whatever, or 3 years, they're not moving for 3 years. So they're trying to figure out how can they keep the bone from doing this over that 3-year period or whatever time that they're going to be asleep as they move out there. And so one of the studies that they looked at was actually cats. So cats, right? They don't do anything. They sit there, right? And yet when they jump, their bones are very strong. Like they can jump on from floor to floor and their bones are very strong. So the NASA researchers were trying to figure out why is it that these cats are so strong? And it turns out they think it's the purring. You know how the cats purr? That vibration is going and telling these bone cells that you have to keep building bone. So instead of muscles pulling on the bone, it's just the vibration that's causing the cells to continue to make bone. And so that's why the cat doesn't have to do a whole lot of exercise or eat vitamin D or anything like that. Basically, it just sits there and purrs, and that vibration is enough to keep the bone strong. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that perhaps they're going to do the same thing with the astronauts. So they'll have a vibration portion of the table or the bed that they're sleeping in. So out of the day, there'll be some period of time where they do the vibration, and that will be the stimulus for the bones to grow strong. For you and I, we're not going to, I guess you could hold a cat and have it purr, but perhaps the best thing to do is to move around, continue to move. The muscles pull on the bone, and then the bones will stay strong in that way. This is a blood vessel with a big blood clot in it. So if this happens in your heart, then this is a heart attack. If this happens in the pipe that's going to your brain, then that's a stroke. And so therefore, this is what about 80% of people will die from, a heart attack or a stroke. And so that's why we spend so much time treating blood pressure, because if you have very high blood pressure, it will damage the lining. And the lining of the inside is very smooth. It's very nice lining. But if you damage the lining, then all of a sudden the cholesterol that's moving in the pipe, so we're moving cholesterol around because our body needs cholesterol, then the cholesterol is going to end up going into the wall. So if the wall is damaged, then the cholesterol goes into the wall. So instead of just going up and down the pipe, it's now getting stuck in the wall. And you could see here, there's a lot of cholesterol. And you can imagine this cholesterol can keep growing. And now the whole of the pipe becomes smaller and smaller. So you'd get less blood flow, so that when you walk, your heart is not getting enough blood. And so then your heart will complain. And that's when you get chest pain. You hear about people with chest pain. And that's one of the reasons why. Occasionally, these cholesterol things will crack, and then it's like a cut on the inside. So it's just like a cut, but inside your pipe. And so now you will form a blood clot. And so this blood clot, if it's small, it's just going to become a spot, and then you'll grow over it again, like you'll pave over it, like paving as well. But if, let's say, the blood clot becomes very big, then it plugs up everything. So this thing cracks, the blood clot forms, and let's say it goes out of control and it forms a big blood clot. Now you've plugged up everything, and it's like the Don Valley. Nobody's moving anywhere, so there's no blood flow going to your heart muscle. Your muscle cannot work without any fuel. So no oxygen, no sugar, then the heart will stop working, or that part of the heart muscle will die. And that's what we know as a heart attack. Now, if a big chunk of the heart muscle dies, then the heart doesn't pump anymore, then you get into trouble, and then you have a heart attack, and then some people die this way. So that's why we give you a lot of antiplatelets, so stop the platelets from sticking together. So we give you blood thinners, basically, to try and avoid this. We give you things to lower your cholesterol, and we give you things to lower your blood pressure. And that's why we give you all those medications. We know that sugar causes, the sugar sticks to the blood vessels. Inside the blood vessels, there are some proteins, and sugar sticks to that. And when sugar sticks, when too much sugar is there sticking, then you cause damage to the pipes. So that's why in diabetes, when the sugar is very high, it causes damage to the wall of the pipes, and then you get into all these troubles as well. And then inflammation. So it turns out if you smoke, or if you have a big stomach, you produce a lot of chemicals that make things inflamed, kind of red. And so you can imagine if this plaque becomes inflamed, it's more likely to rupture. And so that's why we try to get rid of fat. We try to, stop smoking. We give you flu shots so that you don't get the flu, because flu is causing inflammation and that becomes a problem. COVID caused inflammation and it caused a lot of heart attacks as well. So that's why if we can get rid of the infection and the inflammation, then that might be helpful as well. So these are the things that we try to treat to lower people's risk of having heart attacks and strokes. And that's why people have to take so many medications, unfortunately, to go after each one of these things. Now, sugar sticking is very interesting. Sugar stick, this is the sexiest picture that Andy would let me show you. So basically sugar sticks to things, and it sticks in your eyes, in your kidneys, in your heart. And that's why people with diabetes have eye problems, heart problems, kidney problems, circulation problems all over the place. So that's why we'd really like to treat diabetes very well. And this is an example of what happens to sugar sticking in the pipes. So the pipes become very weak and then they start to bleed. So this is the back of the eye. So this is the back of the eye, and here's all the arteries coming out in the back of the eye. And you could see these little spots. So you can imagine somebody might not be able to see well. Then what the ophthalmologist does is they use lasers to try and seal it up so that it doesn't bleed. So they sort of play Star Wars in the back of your eye. So you could see that we don't want this to happen in your eye. We like to prevent it. So this is a good looking artery. So we'd like to keep them looking like that. So that's why controlling sugar, controlling blood pressure, cholesterol, making sure the clot doesn't happen is so important for people. And that's why you have a list of 5 or 6 drugs for many people that have these types of disease. Now, we surveyed women about men. I'm glad we have a lot of women on the call. I want to see if this survey is correct. And this is what we surveyed, what we're looking for, and what's looking for us. That's what the women said. So definitely we know that this guy is somehow at high risk. And so therefore we see a lot more people in my office that look like him than like him. So therefore we know that there's more people at risk of having heart attacks and strokes and those kinds of things. This is pre-COVID. This is Michelangelo, it's David, and this is post-COVID. Okay. So we all have our explanations of why did we gain weight. We weren't exercising. We were sitting there watching Netflix and eating food. We were stressed. All of those things were reasons why we gained so much weight. And the exercise part, we're thinking about Tai Chi, right? So Tai Chi, very traditional, very slow. And you would think that that doesn't burn a lot of calories, but it does, because your muscles have to stay contracted for long periods of time. That needs a lot of sugar to be burned. And the other thing is that you're not putting a lot of horrible damaging pressure on your joints. So you're not jumping up and down. So in sort of Western exercise, you could see after an hour, yes, they're sweating, but then they're in pain everywhere, right? Because they're jumping up and down. So perhaps the more gentle kind of exercise like Tai Chi and things like that is something that you could do throughout your whole life and is actually a very good workout for your body as well. Some exercises to do in the bed is very good now. So I started telling people, if your back is not good or whatever, why don't you lie down and do the exercise? And for our elderly population, they seem to like this very much. Because if you think about your spine, for example, you have a bone and then you have a disc and then you have another bone. So when you stand up, there's a lot of pressure on those discs. So if you were to do exercises and turning, you're grinding. It's almost grinding there. But if I lie you down, there's no pressure on the disc. And so now I can turn those joints and it's going to be less painful. And the same thing with your hips, the same thing with your knees, the same thing with your shoulders, because you're lying down now. You're not fighting gravity. So that's why all exercises you can do horizontally on a bed. And that way it'll be much easier for your joints. In the future, you can stand up and do all the exercises. But in the beginning, if you're starting off, that would be a good strategy to start in the bed. The other thing that I've told people is that in the morning when you wake up, before you jump out of bed, just wiggle around, okay? Like in other words, move all those little joints and everything else. So oil up the joints, okay? So if you look at your spine, there's a lot of hinges here. So each one of these things is a joint like this, okay? And so you can imagine that overnight you haven't been moving it. So therefore it becomes rusty, okay? So what you need to do is move the joints around, and then that way you'll get the oil inside there. And then you can get up and move around. And you'll find that if you do that little wiggle around in the bed, when you get out of bed, you don't feel like you're 700 years old trying to get out of bed. So it's a good trick for you to do anytime you change position. So for example, I've been sitting here for a long time. If I'm going to stand up, before I stand up, I should do a little wiggle, get everything oiled up, and then I can start moving around. And that'd be much more comfortable. In terms of chair exercises, we have some elderly people, maybe their balance isn't so good. So we get them to sit on a chair, and that way it's very safe and they can do all sorts of stretching. If they want to use those rubber bands, they can pull against the, their foot is on the rubber band, and then you start pulling upward. And that way you can get some strengthening exercises there as well. If you just have a bed sheet, okay, you could wrap the bed sheet around your foot. You're sitting in the bed, and then you just take your hands and pull up the bed sheet. So now you can pull up your knees, and then your foot can push out. And then as your foot is pushing out, you're fighting your hands. So you can actually work your arms, shoulder, knees, hip, and ankle all in one move. And that way we can do very simple exercises. You're sitting in the bed, so there's no risk of falling down or anything like that either. And so these are exercises that you can do until you're 100. So these are the types of exercises that we like to do. This one's interesting. So this used to be for, treating heel pain. So if you have heel pain, they said, put your foot on top of a water bottle and roll it there. It's like massaging the bottom of your foot. But what I noticed is that people, when you were sitting in front of a computer, what'll happen is that your leg muscles are not working, right? So, and remember, your body's trying to be efficient. So as soon as your muscles are not working, your body will not send blood flow to that area. So therefore, the pipes that are going down to your leg become smaller. So now that's a problem because the pipe is smaller. It's now tighter. So the heart has to pump against a smaller pipe, which is not nice. It's going to have to generate more pressure. So that's more work for your heart. So you just sitting there on this Zoom call and your legs are not moving, then basically the pipes are going to tighten up. Second thing is that if the pipes are tightening up, then the muscles are not getting the oxygen and the blood flow. So they're not burning any calories for you. Okay. So therefore, I was thinking about this. One idea was to do the stand-up desk. Okay. But then a lot of companies don't want to pay for a stand-up desk. Another way is just play with your foot. So if your foot is still rolling on that bottle, then your leg muscles are on and your body will continue to send blood flow. So the pipe will be big. So now the heart is pumping into a big pipe, which is good for the heart. But number two is that we're now sending blood flow to your muscles. Your muscles will use up the sugar, and therefore it'll burn off that calories of the things that you just ate. So if you just keep your feet moving underneath the table, even if you're on a Zoom call, you can keep those muscles going. And then we're kind of like the people that live in the blue zone, right? In other words, they're constantly moving. Now, I know you have to sit there for the Zoom call, but your legs can constantly be moving, and therefore you can continue to burn calories like the people in the blue zone. And this is the difference. So if you keep moving, you can see that the blood flow keeps going. So the redder it is, the more temperature, the higher the temperature, which means there's more blood flow going to that area. And you can see that when you're not moving, basically now this part is not getting the same amount of blood flow. Now it's only about, let's say here, it's only about 4 degrees, 3 degrees difference, right? But imagine how much blood flow that is, that it changes by 3 or 4 degrees. So you could see that there's a huge amount of blood flow going in this person. So this person's going to be easier to pump, but also it's going to be burning lots of calories for you. So that's why keeping your legs moving is actually a very good strategy to lose weight. Stress eating. Okay, so let's talk about food. Andy wanted me to talk about diets and stuff like that. So stress eating is when you're under pressure and then all of a sudden you eat. And when I was under pressure, my nephew was getting married. And so somehow at Costco, they had those Twinkie bars, right, for 50 of them. And I think I ate all 50 in 1 week, because I was stressed out. So what is this stress eating business? So when your body thinks that you're going to war, you will pack food, right? So I like this one. Stressed is desserts backwards. Okay, so that was just a trick on the words. So it turns out that when you're going to war, so let's say he's going to war, he's going to pack large amounts of food. So the same thing your body will do. You are going to look at the highest calorie foods if you're thinking that you're going into war. Now, what do I mean by war? I mean stress. So for example, if you're stressed out, your body thinks you're going to war, like you're going to be fighting. And if you're going to be fighting, I need to fill you up with calories so that you have enough energy to fight. So if you were looking at foods with high calories, this is the calories. So carbohydrates. So if you look at rice, it's about 4 units of energy per gram. Protein is 4 units of energy per gram. Alcohol is 7 units of energy per gram. So this actually has more energy for the same weight. But look at fat. It's 9 units of energy per gram. So if you were going to carry energy with you, then fat would be the best, because for the same 1 gram of weight, I can get 9 calories out of it. So it's like a more concentrated version. And so that's why when you're stressed out, you'll tend to look for fatty foods because you want to load up on your good fuel source that you're going to go to war with. Okay. And so sugar is quick energy. And salt, so you're going to look for sugar as well because you need quick energy if you're going to war. So you're going to look for sugary things. And so that's why people say I eat a lot of dessert when I'm stressed out. Salt is just in case you get cut, you're going to lose blood. And we need salt to hang on to water in our body. So if you're going to lose some blood, I need some liquid in your body. So I need the salt there to hang on to the water. So therefore, your body will look for a salt source to eat that so that you can go to war and be ready for when you get cut. And so that's why this meal is perfect, right? It has everything that you need. It has, the sugar here, it has got, the fats over here, and it's got some carbohydrates and stuff like that. So you're basically getting all of these things together. And so that's why that meal becomes very appealing. And the more stressed out you are, the more appealing that meal will be because you're looking for those same ingredients that are sitting in there. And this is also why these kind of weird things work. Sweet and salty popcorn. So why would the food industry do that? Sweet is the sugar. So therefore, if you're stressed out, you're looking for quick energy, which is sugar, and salty because I need the sodium in case I bleed and get cut in the war, I'm going to need that. So when your brain sees this food, it says, this is a good food. And if I keep eating this, I will be prepared for my war. And so that's why I ate the whole bag that I got from Costco, because your brain thinks that if you eat more of this, it'll be okay. And remember, the brain doesn't think that there's food everywhere. So the brain is still programmed like in the olden days that food is rare. So when you find it, you should load up on the food. And so that's why people will eat a huge amount of food. And so look at this guy, very stressed out on his laptop, having the exact meal that his brain thinks that he needs. So stress equals battle. So when you're under stress, your body thinks you have to go and fight. So therefore, it's going to make you look for these foods that are there. If you don't sleep, your brain thinks that there must be terrible danger. That's why you're not sleeping. So that's why when you cut out sleep, like let's say you have to get the project done for the foundation for tomorrow, and then you stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning, your body thinks that you're in horrible danger and that's why you can't sleep. And then it's going to make you want to grab all those foods and everything else as well. If you skip meals, because people say, well, you told me I'm too fat, so I'm not going to eat anymore, just eat one meal a day, then your body thinks that there's a famine, that there's no food. So therefore, the next time you eat, it's going to grab everything. So that's why people say, I only eat one meal a day, but I'm gaining weight. And that's because the body says, wow, that one meal, we better become very efficient in grabbing all the calories into our body. So skipping meals is not a good strategy for people. And then basically when your body thinks that you're at war, then you're going to stockpile the food. And therefore, you can't lose weight because your body says, I need to hold this fat because we're going to war. So we're going to defend it. So if you want to do exercise, I'm going to make you tired so that you lie down, so that you don't waste your energy. So that's why a lot of people say, I can't exercise. I'm just so exhausted. And that's because the body says, we want to protect these fuel sources. So do not burn them off unnecessarily. So basically your body is fighting you in terms of losing weight. So that's why getting rid of the stress, getting better sleep, and not skipping meals are the 3 extra things we need to help people to lose weight as well. Okay. And remember, your brain is going to go for fat, sweet, and salty if you think you're going to war. Now, this is a very interesting experiment. Remember the Biggest Loser show, the TV show, right? Where these people lose this crazy amount of weight with these very bad diets. So what this guy did in the US, he found all the people that were in that show to see what happened to them. So they lost a lot of weight. The question was, what happened to them later? Okay, did they keep the weight off? And so here are some of the weights that we're talking about. So this one person went from 260 and went down to 105. So she lost 150 pounds, right? That's like another person. And so they wanted to find all these people and see what happened to them afterwards. So he did that. And what he found was the following. So this is during the show. Okay. So during the show, they measured how fast their body was burning energy. Okay. And so what you see here is that in the beginning, a fat person was burning this much energy. And then as they went on the crazy diets, you could see that the energy that they were needing was becoming less. Okay. So in other words, I'm giving you less, and then the body becomes more efficient in that it doesn't need to burn as much because it's trying to keep you alive, right? So if I give you less food, then your body will say, I will do with less. I will do with less. And it kept going downward like that. So then what happened was the following. What happened to the weight and the regain? So if you look over here, this is at the beginning, they lost the weight during the show, right? And then look at what happened to them years afterwards. They gained it all back. And not only did they gain it all back, they gained extra. So this person gained an extra 50 pounds on top of his original weight. So in other words, I went on a crazy diet, okay? And then after I lost the weight, and then I went back to my normal diet, and now I'm actually weighing more than before. And so people were trying to figure this out, and that's because your body became more efficient. So it became like a Prius, like a hybrid, right? So when you forced it with the very low calories, your body became very efficient. So it was able to live on just this many calories. So when I gave you back the same amount of calories before, you now have even more calories that you can store as fat. Because remember, the body's trying to keep you alive. So if there's no food, it becomes actually more efficient. So every time you went on one of those crazy diets where you said, I'm just going to eat, one piece of bread a day or one bowl of rice a day, basically your body became more efficient. And so now when I feed it, it's going to have even more calories left over. So that's why all these people lose weight and then they gain weight and then some, the extra stuff that's sitting there. So that's why we don't recommend these crash diets, because you're just making the body even more efficient in sort of preserving that weight. How much should you eat? So this is from the Diabetes Canada people. So this is if you have diabetes, then you should eat sort of 1 fistful of carbohydrates. So if you're talking about rice or bread or potatoes, it should be 1 fistful. And that's how much starch and fruits you should be having. If you're looking at vegetable, it's 2 handfuls of vegetables. So you lay tao choy or whatever, you can actually have a fair amount of vegetables, as long as it's not creamy. And then if you're looking at meat, it should be the size of your palm and roughly the same thickness. Okay, so in terms of that would be meat, red meat. And then if you're talking about chicken or fish, then it's the whole hand that you can have. And that's sort of a rough guide. Now, in Chinese cooking, we use much less, which is better. But in terms of Western, this is how they basically explain things to people. But in Chinese cooking, because we slice everything up, we actually don't have a huge amount of meat, but we have a huge amount of rice. So therefore, we have to be careful about the rice proportion. And this is how much fat or butter, those kinds of things you should have, is just a little thumb tip or oil. And basically, that's what you do. And so another way to look at it is just to look at a plate. So half the plate should be vegetables. And then half the plate should be sort of grains and stuff like that, and then proteins. Okay, so you can break things up to different portions of your plate. So that's one way of doing it. If you're eating from a rice bowl, then perhaps have a plate that you put your food onto the plate itself, and then you can work off the rice bowl and then work off the food that way. And so that would be a good way to control the proportion. The buffet style is no good. So at home, it's sort of usually buffet style, right? You have all the food in front of you and just keep eating it until you finish the bowl because your mother told you to finish the bowl. So in other words, proportion control might be sort of the easiest way, just by taking it and putting it onto a plate. And then that way you only eat off of that. Where's the beef? This is a very interesting story. So this was the Wendy's commercial, right? Where's the meat? Where's the beef? And this is one of the things with the elderly population is they don't like to eat meat because it's complicated to do. So the little popos, they don't usually cook, right? So they might have some rice, they might have a piece of bread, toast, tea, something like that. So in the Caucasian world, it's usually tea and toast, and that's it. And there's no nutrition in tea and toast. There's just calories, but there's no vitamins, there's no proteins or anything like that. And one of the problems that we're seeing is these are amino acids. So amino acids, as you can see, they're all the same at the top, but the tail is very different, okay? So the top is the same in amino acids, the tails are different. And protein is made up of amino acids put together like a necklace. So what we do is we put proteins together like a necklace, and it looks like this. So we have different proteins hanging there. And basically these little different parts, when you push them together, they have electrical charge. So they're going to push against each other. And because they can push against each other, they're going to push each other into different shapes. So this is your amino acids. So these are all the necklaces together. And then when you let go, they push against each other and they can fold up into these shapes. Okay. So that one little protein chain, the amino acid chain, when you let go, will fold up because of the electrical charges into these different shapes. And so therefore, we can make all sorts of funny, I can't make these kinds of things, but you can imagine the shapes that you can make with this. You can make a pair of scissors to cut proteins and stuff like that. Now, they don't look like this, but in the chemical world, they act as scissors. They can act looking like this. So we can make all sorts of different shapes with those proteins that we're looking at. And many of our body, like our hair, our skin, our teeth, everything is based on these proteins. So these little old ladies, every part of their body is made from protein. The heart muscle, the bones, everything has protein in it. So let's say they decide to just drink tea and toast and they don't eat the meat. So now they don't have the raw materials to make it. So these are the essential amino acids. Remember the ones with the long chains? So these ones you have to eat. You cannot get it any other way. So this has to come in by food. And then you could use these ones to make the little necklaces that you want. But let's say you're missing these two, just these two. You're missing those two. Okay, you didn't eat enough of that one. So now what happens when you make your necklace, these spots are going to be missing those particular areas, let's say. And these spots are going to be missing the other one. So what will your body do? Your body will just put in a substitute. So in other words, if I'm missing this thing, I'm just going to put in the next one. But the next one might be a different length, right? And therefore, the electrical charge is different. So therefore, the folding is going to be different. And so therefore, you might fold it in the wrong way. So this is where if people don't eat the protein, then they don't have the material to make the stuff that they need in their body to stay healthy. And so now all of a sudden, instead of making the nice swan, you might be making proteins that look like this. So let's say those proteins are collecting. So in Alzheimer's disease in the head, they see these little lumps of these amyloid protein, these abnormal proteins that are sticking together, and they become like garbage. And that garbage may be killing the brain cells and therefore giving Alzheimer's disease. So therefore, the nutritional side is very important because you need to give your body all the raw materials so that they can make all the different parts that they need so that they can avoid these sort of wrong proteins to be made. The other thing is that your brain washes itself. I don't know if you guys know this, but they were doing research and they figured out that the brain has to wash away a lot of chemicals. So, you know, like at a restaurant, Chinese restaurant, right? They're cooking really fast during the day, but at nighttime they have to clean up, right? Because they're generating a lot of garbage in the kitchen. So they have to clean up. Your brain does the same thing. So listening to me, your brain is processing lots of stuff. There's lots of chemicals being generated that are garbage. And so therefore we need to clean out the garbage at some point. And so at nighttime, when you sleep, is when we clean up. And it turns out the way it cleans it up is that it flushes water through your brain. So your brain opens up these channels, and they've done this in mice. You can see these channels, okay, where the fluid that the brain floats in, the cerebral spinal fluid, that's where the brain floats, that fluid comes flushing in to the brain, and it starts to wash away all this built up bad proteins. And so by doing that, we can wash it away so that tomorrow morning, your kitchen is brand new again. So your brain is brand new, and then you can think quickly, and then you can build up the process, and then you have to flush again at night. So therefore, sleeping is not just repairing, you know, where your body can rest, but it's also this cleaning up process that we now understand with the brain. So this is the brain of a mouse where they can put this. They didn't do this to a real human, but they did this with a mouse. With humans, they did scans of the brain, and they could see these little channels where the fluid is going and trying to flush things out. Now, if you have more sleep, then you will have more flushing. Therefore, your brain will be sharper in the morning because it's clean and it's ready to go. More horizontal sleep, the more flushing. So what happens if you sleep this way? Now that's a problem, right? So if you're sleeping on an airplane, it's very hard to flush upward, right? It's easy when you're lying down to flush horizontally, but it's very hard to flush upward. So that's why after your long flight to China or to Taiwan or to Hong Kong or whatever, basically you feel terrible because you're sitting up, even though you're asleep. Your brain is not flushing out. Your head becomes very cloudy. I like this one in Japan. I think it was Japan, or I'm not sure, but they basically hold your head up while you're sleeping on the subway. And you can imagine this sleep is no good because there's no flushing going up there. So she's asleep. She thinks that she got sleep, but definitely it's not the same kind of sleep. This guy is sleeping on his desk. It's kind of horizontal, but the problem is the rest of his body is still below him. So therefore, it's very hard for fluid to come up and flush again. So even this being horizontal, still not a good flushing. What you need to be is lying down. So therefore, the recommendation is to lie flat, not to sit up on a chair when you're actually trying to sleep. And that way you'll get better flushing. If we don't flush out those proteins, maybe that amyloid stuff that I talked about will build up, and then you get more Alzheimer's disease. So doctors and specialists are trying to look at this flushing mechanism. Is it working in people with Alzheimer's? Can we make it work for you and I better? Maybe what we just need is we need more time horizontal sleeping. So on average, you need about 6 hours to flush. So that's why if you only sleep 4 hours, that's a problem. You don't have the full flushing cycle. And so therefore, we're going to have problems in that it's not very clean every single day. Snoring at night, I think this person tells you what's happening. So snoring at night is very difficult because what happens, your tongue is falling backwards and it basically blocks. And so what we're looking for is snoring, but more importantly, when people stop breathing. Okay, so you'll hear people breathe, 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 and then no breathing. And then you'll hear breathing again because the carbon dioxide builds up in the body, and then the brain wakes up and says, what's going on? How come I'm not getting oxygen? And so therefore the brain will wake up, and then it'll pull your tongue forward. And then by pulling your tongue forward, you will unplug that area. So you can see how this is completely plugged up. When you start to wake up, then you will pull your tongue forward and then you unclog it, and then you get the snoring thing happening. So if you have somebody telling you you stop breathing at night, that's sleep apnea, where you stop breathing. Apnea just means no breathing. So if you stop breathing at night, now that's very dangerous because your body's not getting oxygen during that time. You're basically suffocating. And so therefore we need to correct that by blowing air into your mouth. And so you could actually look at your own throat. This person, you can see not a good situation. This person unlikely to have problems, right? Because the hole is quite big in the back. So therefore, if you stop breathing in the middle of the night, that one we should be able to check. And the reason for that is because the chance of having, death from a heart attack, those kinds of things, these are the numbers. So this is the person with bad, where they stop breathing in the middle of the night. This is the person on the machine where they blow the air in there so that you are always breathing at night. And you could see a big difference, a reduction in terms of the number of fatal, in other words, death-causing heart attacks and strokes. And these are the snorers. So you can see that if you just snore, but you don't stop breathing, your risk isn't that high. And then if you look at the heart attacks that didn't kill people, you could still see a huge difference between those two groups. So that's why if you do stop breathing in the middle of the night, then make sure that you get checked for that one, because that one's very important. And of course, there's more accidents in the daytime because you're not well rested because of the sleep. Eyeballs, just real quick, trying to keep your vision is important. So cataracts, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, if you have diabetes, get your eyes checked, and then macular edema. So these are all very common eye diseases that could make you go blind. And then if you're blind, then your lifestyle is no good. So therefore, get your eyes checked, optometrist, ophthalmologist, something like that. Be careful about super bright lights because we're all staring at phones right now. We're not used to staring at the sun. Normally, we stare at reflected light, right? So sun hits something and then you see the object. Here, we're staring directly at the sun, more or less. And so that's why it's causing more damage to the back of the eye. There's more people that are becoming nearsighted because the object is so close to them. So therefore, maybe we should be careful because nearsighted people are more likely to have retinal detachment. So the screen in the back of the eye might fall down. So therefore, we should be careful. If ever you see like a dark curtain coming down, that's a retinal detachment. And that's one that you go straight to the hospital and tell them that it looks like a screen that has come down. Okay. Hearing, okay, very important to keep. People yelling at you, I know is bad, but if you can't hear, then there's more chance of dementia, like the Alzheimer's stuff, because your brain isn't being activated. So if you can't hear, then that part of the brain is not being stimulated, so your body will take away those cells. And so that's why restoring hearing would be very good for our patients. I like this one, no teeth. Okay, so this is Obama with no teeth. Obviously, this is a fake picture. So therefore, if you have no teeth, you cannot chew, and therefore your nutrition goes down. So please floss to get rid of the food, and please brush after each meal. And that way you can keep your teeth, and that way you can continue to enjoy nutrients that you can. I love this picture of the smoker. So smoking is really bad. And I remember somebody said, that's so mean of you to make her look so old. She didn't smoke like that from birth. Actually, I have a picture of her. She did smoke from birth. You could see that she's got a cigarette there. So the bottom line is cigarette smoke, you're breathing in toxic stuff that will destroy your lungs. And this is what a normal lung looks like. And this is what a smoker's lungs looks like. Okay, very different looking. And you could see the diaphragm. That's the one that you breathe with. So over here, you could see that we can pull the diaphragm down so that we can make the space bigger so that air would then come in. Okay. Whereas over here, this diaphragm is not going anywhere. So it's just flat. So it can't change the shape. So therefore, it's very hard to get air in and out. So that's why a smoker's lung is very bad. They can't breathe very easily. So quitting smoking would be a very good strategy. Oh, I love this one, pooping. So now we're talking about, and you thought your job sucked, So the idea is that the microbiome, these are the bacteria that live in our gut. So these are good bacteria. And so it turns out that in our body, we have 10 trillion cells. Mainly it's red blood cells that it's in our body. Bacteria, we have 100 trillion. So 10 times more bacteria in our body than our own cells. And so therefore they must be important. We have about 20,000 genes in our DNA. So just think of one gene as making one protein, okay? So we can make, let's say, 20,000 different proteins. But if you look at the bacteria genes, they have 3.3 million. So they can make 3.3 million types of proteins, and, chemical reactions can happen from that. So you could see that we are borrowing their processing power. So the bacteria are helping us digest the food, and then we pick up the raw materials that they give us. So that's why we need the bacteria to be healthy for us to have that. So we used to have about 1,000 different types of germs in our body, in the bowels, but now they're saying we're down to like about 600 on average. And that's because our food is becoming more, deep fried. It's all becoming the same. And so therefore the bacteria are now becoming less diverse. So therefore, if you want to increase diversity, increase the types of foods that you eat. Don't focus on one thing. Eat multiple different foods that we have as well. And then I hate to show you stool samples, but these are stool sample pictures. And so this is constipated little pellets. This is beautiful banana, and this is diarrhea here. So it's actually very good to look at your stools and see what's coming out. So we like to see banana. Nice and smooth, not constipated. That's good. That means you have enough fiber, you have enough water, and your microbacteria is doing its job. Okay. If you start seeing these kinds of things, you need more water and fiber. If you see these kinds of things, you've got a diarrhea process, so you're not absorbing. So therefore need to get checked and so on and so forth. Oh, I like this one. What about kidneys? So you're going to see some numbers that your doctors will tell you. They'll talk about an EGFR. That's basically the speed at which your kidneys go. And I always tell people you want to be 60 miles an hour or higher. So if they tell you a number like 30, that means you're only half the speed, so your kidneys are not as good. So this is about speed of the kidney function. The other one is this number called albumin creatinine ratio. Okay, and it's a complicated term, but all this is measuring is the quality of your filter. So a good filter should get rid of garbage, in this case, and it should keep the good stuff. A good filter should get rid of garbage, but keep the good stuff. So in this case, albumin, which is like a protein in our body, is the good stuff. We'd like to keep that. And creatinine is breakdown of your muscle. So we'd like to get rid of that. So when we look at a ratio of albumin, the good stuff over the bad stuff, if it's the perfect kidney, this is the only one that gets out. So then albumin would be 0 divided by some number. So a low number means good quality kidneys. On the other hand, if you're losing a lot of albumin, the good stuff, then you're going to have a big number over another number. So now the albumin creatinine ratio goes up. So that's how we can look at the numbers. A low number is a good thing. You have a good quality of your kidneys. So if they give you numbers like that, it's important that you understand what they measure. What about stress? Okay, so I think Andy's asked me to talk about stress. And so I like this one. I'm sorry about the swearing, but basically this is nature. So the ostrich is running and this guy is trying to chase it. So this is happening in nature all the time. We have that same fight or flight response. So remember when I said when you're stressed, you think you're going to war? This is the system. So in other words, when you're under stress, so let's say the financial report, that you guys just put out, you had to get the numbers done last night. You're under a lot of stress. So therefore your brain is saying, this is terrible. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And so therefore, what do you think this guy needs right now? Well, it's going to have a big stress attack. And so this fight or flight response kicks in. Okay. And when it kicks in, what does this guy need? Oops, sorry. What this guy needs is the heart rate to go up so that he can run. He needs the blood pressure to go up so that he can supply blood to his legs. And he needs sugar for the muscles to burn. So therefore, high heart rate, blood pressure, and high sugar is what that bird needs. In you and I, we have that same system. So when we're stressed, the body thinks that you need to run away from danger. So therefore, this lady that's sitting in her car trying to drink her coffee, talk on the phone, and beat traffic, the body is saying she needs high heart rate, high blood pressure, high sugar, because she needs to run, because she needs to get away from danger. But you know that she's not going to run, right? So therefore, high blood pressure is no good, high sugar is no good. So these are now going to damage the walls in the pipes as well. And so therefore, instead of this scenario where that system is on just for a short amount of time. So in nature, it's only supposed to be on for a short amount of time. It's not on for long. But unfortunately, for us, our stress level goes up and it stays there. So this system is no longer just on and off, it's on all the time. And if it's on all the time, what happens is that we have extra stress on there. So in the morning, you wake up, you have stress, then you go to work, there's more stress. So on top of this, we're now having these spikes going up. So what does that mean? Well, it means that our heart rate is always up, our blood pressure is always up, and the sugar is always high because your body thinks that you need to run for your life. But I'm sitting in front of a patient, you're sitting in front of a computer, and you're getting stressed out. So you're not going to be running, you're not going to use any of these resources that we give you. So now the blood pressure is too high and it does the damage to the wall. Your heart is beating very fast. So now the heart is working harder and there's too much sugar coming into your blood. And so therefore, you're going to have diabetes issues. You can see that our lifestyle may be making things a whole lot worse for us and therefore causing some of our diseases as well. My final concept I want to give to you is this idea of making mistakes. Okay, so let me explain what this is. So this is your DNA. So that's the blueprints, right? That contains everything to make everything about you. So to make all the proteins, to make your skin, your hair, your eye color, all comes from the DNA. It turns out the DNA is now the main blueprint. So what we do is we make a copy of it, and that's called RNA. And you heard a lot about RNA because that's what the vaccine is, right? So we give you a copy of the blueprints on how to make that spike protein. In this case, it's a copy of the blueprints to make any protein, my hair, my skin, my eyes, whatever. And then from this RNA, we're going to go into the factory and we're going to make the protein. Okay, so this is the one that tells us which amino acid to put in. Okay, so this little map will say, put this amino acid, then this one, then this one, and this one, and then let go, and then the whole thing will fold properly. So that's the steps of how we do things. Now, this is needed for everything. So the structure, so in other words, my skin, my bones, everything needs protein. Enzymes to do chemical reactions need proteins. Receptors, neurotransmitters that you've heard about are all proteins. So therefore, they're all things that we require in terms of the setup. So how do we make that little messenger thing, that little RNA thing? It turns out your DNA is sort of scrambled. So instead of having the whole code in one string, there are parts that are part of the code and parts that are not. The blue parts is the real code. The yellow parts, I guess, think of it like instructions, like put this one together with this one, but it's not the real code. So the blue one is the actual string of the blueprints. The yellow one is sort of, think of it like paragraphs of instruction. So what your body has to do, it makes a copy of this one, then it has to cut out the parts that are just instructions, and then you put those blue pieces together, and that's the RNA that you're going to go make into the protein. Okay. And then you make the protein and then we go. So therefore, the guy that's doing this job is doing something complex, right? It has to take the blue pieces and put them together. So in your cell, how fast does this happen? So if I asked you to do this, right? Take the blue pieces, put it together, you would say, okay, give me some time, I could do it, right? So it turns out that we have 1,000 of these RNAs at any time within our cells. So we need about 1,000 of these little blueprints moving around at any moment. And it turns out half of them are destroyed every 30 minutes. So the half-life is 30 minutes. So half of them are destroyed. So that means you have to keep producing them. So how fast would it be? And I know you guys are good at math, but basically if you did the math, which is what these researchers did, they said it would mean that you have to make one of these RNA things every 3 seconds to keep up with that pace. Okay. So every 3 seconds, you have to do that assembly, and you have to do that for different proteins, for 1,000 different types. And this is in a healthy cell. Okay. So this isn't a cell that's not under stress or anything like that. Now imagine if we put you under stress, like damage, like from smoking, alcohol, diabetes, high blood pressure, after you put a stent in, surgery, post-COVID, like you got infected, then the cell would have to work harder because it needs to produce a lot more proteins to repair. So in other words, it would be faster than 1 in every 3 seconds. So the problem with it is that the guy that's doing that reading might start to make mistakes now. So they might put the wrong blue parts together, or they might forget the yellow part should not go in. And so when you make mistakes like that, then you're going to make an error in the blueprints. And so if the blueprints is not correct, then the protein that you make is not correct. And whatever that protein was supposed to do is not correct. Let's say it's my skin. So I keep making mistakes now, then my skin is going to get wrinkly and old. So perhaps this is the basis of aging. And it turns out, as we look at people that are older, their processing speed is faster, and the guy is making more mistakes. And so that's why that would be part of the aging process. You could also understand that if the mistakes are really big, could we create cells that grow forever, like cancer? And so therefore, maybe the same common area is causing aging as well as causing cancer. So our goal is not to make that guy go faster, because as soon as he goes faster, he starts making mistakes. And that's when we either get aging or we get cancer, because the cells are no longer producing the right protein. And so therefore, maybe what we need to do is figure out cancer in the future. But for now, I think just understanding, how do we slow things down? Okay. And so an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So how do we prevent this thing from speeding up? And so this is JFK. He actually said this: don't just add years to life, but add life to those years. In other words, make the quality better. So remember those blue zone people? They weren't rushing around. They were not stressed. They were purposeful. They had purpose in life. They hung out with each other. It was a big community, lots of support. So they're not on their own. So perhaps what we need to do is slow down, maybe calm down, don't worry, and don't hurry, right? In other words, we want to make our body not stressed out. So not having to make so many copies, therefore having to make mistakes along the way. And then if we don't make mistakes, then maybe we can slow down aging, and maybe we slow down the process of generating cancers and those kinds of things as well. So if you look at the word illness, I remember reading this somewhere. If you replace the I with a we, then you get wellness. So in other words, if you take away the I and you change it to a we, illness becomes wellness. So I think in a weird way, they were saying the following: if we work together, you have less stress. In the blue zone people, they all work together. We walk together, that's your exercise, right? So no, you don't go out for an hour exercise where you actually go onto a treadmill or anything. You go and walk with people. We eat together, and therefore you tend to cook better foods. And they use low temperature cooking, not the burning and all that kind of stuff, very low temperature stewing. And they find that that's the best way to keep the nutrients in the food without introducing new chemicals. So when I put a steak onto a grill and I have that sizzling noise and I see the smoke coming off, the heat that I'm putting in is enough energy to cause molecules to hit each other to create new chemicals. And some of those new chemicals are not good for you. So that's why when you get the barbecue sauce that drips off the meat, and we all save it for the gravy, that actually has a lot of cancer-causing chemicals in it, because we've had high heat in order to generate those chemicals. Whereas in the blue zone countries, they do a lot of, crock pot, slow cooking, so low temperature cooking, and that way you preserve the nutrients and you break down the food so you can absorb it. That's one of the reasons why I think us humans did better than animals. It's because they eat raw food, we eat cooked food. And I think the story goes, there was some forest fire, there were animals that were burnt, and then we are not good hunters, so we ate the burnt animals. And because the food was cooked, the proteins were easy for us to absorb. And also we didn't have as many infections. So therefore we didn't die from, parasites and things like that. So that might be one of the reasons why we evolved so quickly, is because we were able to get the raw materials out of the food because it was cooked. So that's why slow cooking would maintain the food quality, but still break it down so that we can absorb it as well. And then finally, if we laugh together, I think that's well-being. That's the community sense, right? And so therefore, the chance of depression, anxiety, loneliness, those kinds of things are much less when you're part of a community. So I was listening to you guys with your annual meeting. You are a great community and you're doing good work. So you're purposeful. You are working together. You are eating together and happy together, I guess, in that sense. And soon you will all look like the same because you'll have beautiful t-shirts. And so therefore, perhaps you guys are already doing what the people in the blue zone areas are doing as well. So remember these people, remember what they're doing. And they're not working hard at staying young. They're just able to stay young and continue to live a good life as well. So I like this one. So never give up. Okay. So always there's a chance. And so hopefully at the end of this, you see that there's many things that we can do in order to make sure that we lead a good life, a good long life, where we continue to be purposeful and able to serve as well. Anyway, thanks very much for your time. And I'll stop here and I'll turn things back to Andy.
Thank you so much, Dr. for a fascinating presentation. So much stuff there. We did record it. I think we probably should put it on the website so people can come back and watch the game. So the more people will benefit from it. So now we have some time for questions. The one question I would like to ask on behalf of many people is about the test. So people go to do their physical check every year. Some people have difficulty reading their reports. How mine and my wife is, very similar things. I have a problem and she's healthy. So can you just quickly touch on some of the main factors or numbers in the test? So tell people how to read it.
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of times you'll see hemoglobin. Okay. So the hemoglobin is the red blood cells in your body. And so you'll see normal ranges, like, for example, women will be 120 to 150, for example. And so you're looking for if you're in the range. Most of the labs now will flag the abnormal ones. So either they'll make it red color or they'll make it bolded in numbers. So you're always looking at your results and then the range of the results for you that you should be expecting. So hemoglobin is one. So that's the one with looking at whether you're low in your blood count. You will see one like the kidney function that we talked about, EGFR. So EGFR is the speed of your kidney. So you want to see above 60. You'll see a number called that albumin creatinine ratio where you're looking at the protein leaking. You know that one as well. The sugar, you're going to see two numbers for it. One is fasting blood sugar. So FBS, fasting blood sugar. And that one, again, they'll give you a range saying that, below 6 is good. And above 6, we have to worry. And above 7 and so on and so forth is diabetes. So they'll give you a range. And so that's measuring your sugar in your blood. You're going to measure the sugar sticking to your hemoglobin, and that's known as A1C. And that's a percentage. So basically it'll say of your blood, how much is the sugar sticking to? And the higher the percentage, the worse it is. So normal people, less than 6%. Diabetes, 6.5% or more. And so therefore, if you come back at 10%, that's really high, okay? And so therefore, it again will show you what the normal range is sitting on the side. You will also look at cholesterol. That's very common. So there's the total cholesterol. That's the complete amount of cholesterol in your blood. And then there's the good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So the good cholesterol is called HDL, starts with an HDL. And basically that one is the one that removes cholesterol from your body. So in other words, these are the trucks coming out, getting rid of the garbage. The LDL is the bad cholesterol. That's the delivery truck. So that's the one that's delivering cholesterol to the heart and to the pipes and everything else. So we would like to see the bad one low, less than 2. And we would like to see the good one above 1.3. And again, you'll have the numbers there. So you don't have to remember the numbers, but if you know what each section is looking at, that would be helpful. Triglycerides, or TG, you're going to see is the fats in your blood. So there we will like to see the number less than 1.3. So if it's higher than that, then we have to pay attention again. So that's all the cholesterol kind of numbers that are there. You're going to see some that's on the urine, you know, so it's going to say, is there any blood in the urine? Is there any protein in the urine? It should all be negative. There should be none of those things in there. So if you see something in there, like a little plus sign, then that's something to ask your doctor about. And I usually tell people, because now you can access your own labs on the computer. So what you could do is look it up, and then you're just looking quickly down which are the ones that are abnormal. So that would be either in red color or bold, like a bold print. And then you can look at the side of the word and then just copy the word and type it into Google. And many times it'll come up with what the test is looking for. So that way, when you talk to the doctor, you already know what the test is about. And then it's just a management question, like, what do we do about it? Okay, so that way, when you talk with the doctor, it'll be quicker because they don't have to explain, you know, this is a test for your sugar, and you already know that. And so therefore, now the question is, what do we do about it? So therefore, it speeds up the conversation very nicely that way. You're also going to see a PSA number for men, which is the prostate specific antigen. So from your prostate gland, this protein is being made. If you have a bigger gland, you're going to make more. If you have cancer, you make a lot more. So normally we like to see it below 4. So if it's above 4, then we have to worry that there's maybe cancer that's sitting there. And we also look at how fast it moves. So let's say, I always tell my patients, you know, today you're 0.75. So you're less than $1. So I always joke, you're not even a dollar store yet, okay? However, if next year I tell you you're $3, then we're going to say, wait, I was less than $1. How come I'm suddenly, you know, $3? So the speed at which it goes up is also important as well. So that's for the PSA for the men when they're doing it. If you're going to do a PSA test, make sure that you haven't had intercourse, sex. Make sure that you haven't sat on a bicycle, because it pushes on your prostate and it makes that number go higher. So therefore, before you do the test, just make sure that there's no irritation to that area. Otherwise, that number may go up as well. And I think the easiest thing is just to find the words, Google it. And usually there's the first couple are from laboratories themselves. And then that way you read about what that thing is measuring, so that when you talk to the doctor, you'll already know some information and you know the language already.
Right. So the other common question is about supplements. What can you say about that?
Yeah, that's tough. So there's a lot of supplements, and the problem with supplements is that they don't have to do studies. Okay, so they don't have to prove that they work, and they don't have to prove what their side effects are. Whereas the prescription medication, they have to show that it works, and it shows that the side effect is reasonable, right? Like it doesn't kill people and that kind of thing. So that's why the level of confidence with the prescription stuff is much higher, because they studied 5,000 people and then they can tell you what happened to those people. Whereas supplements, they don't have to do that. And they were included not as a medicine, but as a nutritional supplement. So it's like a dietary thing. So that's when the government said, well, if you're just a diet thing, you don't have to prove that you work or don't work. However, there's lots of things written about it saying this will make you better. Like St. John's wort will make your brain better. You can remember things better, or it'll make you less depressed, for example, right? So you have all these kind of claims that people make. And then what happens is that people go and take it. And then people always think that, well, if a little is good, then I should take more. Now, the problem is when you start taking more of these herbals, they might have some side effects. Some of them have interactions with your other drugs. And so now we might be affecting the drugs that you're taking, for example. And so that's why if you are going to take any of the supplements, herbal medication, let's say, then just double check with the pharmacist, because the pharmacist knows a lot about which ones should not be mixed together. The other thing that you can do is drugs.com. Sometimes you can search that and it'll talk about drug interactions, whether there's a clashing between the two. But unfortunately, with the herbal area, we don't have a lot of studies, so we might not know a whole lot about it. And we've had herbals that kill the kidneys as well. And it wasn't the actual herbal, it was just a contaminant. So in other words, the purification process of the herbals is not very good. So when they take the roots, they might not get rid of the toxic stuff. And so therefore you may have some toxic stuff mixed in there as well. And so therefore we have to be careful that the quality of these things may not be so good. As far as normal supplements like vitamins and things like that, the one that I think most of us need is vitamin D, because we don't get enough sunshine. We need about your back exposed for about 10 minutes to make enough vitamin D from your skin, but we don't get 10 minutes during the winter time in Canada. So therefore we do need to take vitamin D. So vitamin D comes as vitamin D3. And they're 1,000 international units per pill. And the recommendation is between 1 to 4 pills is enough for most people. And so therefore 1 to 4 pills, so between 1,000 and 4,000 units is enough. You will also find vitamin D in your milk. So there's about 100 units inside the milk as well. So you can just add them all up. And that's what I tell people to do is you're taking multiple vitamins and vitamin D and milk, just add them all up. And then you know how much you're taking all together. Because we don't want to get too much of these things, right? Because the whole idea is you want to live long and do well, but you don't want to get too much toxic. If you take too much, then it may be too much in your system as well.
Yeah, I'm going to read a few questions from the chat.
Sure.
If you stand upside down, your head, is that good for your brain?
Yeah, no. So the problem when you stand upside down, so your brain was designed for blood flow going upward, okay? So it was never designed for a huge pressure of blood going in, right? So when we turn you upside down, now there's lots of blood flow going in, and the problem is the veins cannot get the blood out. Okay. So normally when I'm standing up, the veins have no pressure. The veins is just using gravity to drain. So imagine this like a drain pipe on your roof. There's no pressure, right? The water just goes down. Now imagine if you turn that upside down, the water cannot go up anymore. So that's why when you stand on your head, the veins are going to have a hard time getting rid of the blood. So now what happens is that all the blood is going into your head, but we can't get rid of it because you're upside down. And so now your head becomes swollen. And that's why a lot of people say, I don't like it when my head is tilted downward. It feels very full. And so that's why we don't recommend downward tilting. If you want to lie flat is okay. So you see people lying flat with their legs up. You can do that. That's not a problem. And that's because the veins is flat. So they're still able to drain the blood out of your head. So I would not stand on your head. You could lie flat and then with your legs up, and that's helpful, but not upside down.
Okay, so what is the best treatment to correct a deformed cervical spine? Is the inversion table effective for aligning the spine when I completely shiver my body?
Yeah, so cervical spine problems, what happens is that, as you know, there's a bone, the disc, there's a vertebral bone, and then there's a soft cushion, and then there's another bone here, and that's how your spine is made. And so what's happened is that the disc gets smaller over time. So therefore it dries up and it gets smaller. So now the bones may be close to each other. And the problem is the nerve that goes to your arm is coming between the two bones. So as the bones come together, you may be touching that nerve. So the best thing to do is you can try an inversion table just a little bit, okay? But your head isn't gonna stretch too much more, okay? So better yet is horizontal. So lying flat is good enough, I think. You don't need to tilt further down. But more importantly, you need to avoid this position. So looking down. So when you're looking at your phone, looking down is really bad because there's a lot of pressure in your neck. And the reason for that is because your head is about 10 pounds, right? So when you look down, the muscles in the back of the neck need to pull very tight. Otherwise, your head is going to fall off. And so therefore the muscles are tightening up. And so now it's bringing the bones closer together. So your bones were already close. And when the muscles tighten up, it's pushing the bones even closer together. And therefore you're going to squish things. So that's why people don't feel good looking down. Also, if you have bifocals, you know, the bifocals, those are not so good because to look at the bifocal, you have to do this with your neck and then stare at the lower half of the glasses. So if you have bifocals and you have to do something close, like you have to read a lot, or you have to do some hobby that's close, then get a pair of near glasses. In other words, reading glasses. So the whole lens is the same. And that way you can look straight out instead of having to stare downward in the bifocal. And that will help avoid some of the neck problems. We had some people, my secretary was when they first started on computers, right? She had bifocals. So to see the computer, she had to do this to look into the bifocal. And so when she did this, she was bending her neck all the time. And so her neck was in this position all the time, and she was having horrible neck pain. So we got her glasses so that she can just look straight out and look at the computer screen. So we got her a computer screen pair of glasses, and that way she doesn't have to do this weird thing with her neck. So just look at your position of your neck. And then finally, sleeping position is very important. So most of us, if you sleep on your side, your shoulder is too big for your head. Okay. So, and your neck has no support. So most of us sleep like this with the pillow here, and then your shoulder is shoved underneath your neck. So now your neck is all crooked. So the way to fix that is we roll a towel into a sausage and we put it right here. Okay. So this will support your neck, and you can roll the towel big or small to support your neck. So we want your back to be straight across, not like this crooked stuff. And that will help with your back as well.
How about just a bigger pillow?
Yeah, so you can do a bigger pillow, but the problem with the bigger pillow is that it makes your head prop up. So the supporting area is this. So imagine
Just the neck.
your head is supported by pillow, your shoulder is here, your neck is like a bridge. So your neck is not supported, and so it sags. And that's why you end up shoving your shoulder in there to stop the neck from sagging. So that's why
there are these round, small pillows. Would that be a better option?
Yes. The only reason why I suggest a towel, because it's free. Okay. You don't have to buy anything, and you could change the size by rolling it bigger or smaller. And then once you get the right size, then you can go buy a pillow or something. But the problem with the pillow is just it's fixed size, right? So one side is small, one side is big. So this way you can roll the towel so that you understand how big you need. And then you can figure out if there's a pillow for you. If there isn't, then just keep using the towel in that way.
So follow-up question about cervical spine. What could it cause back pain during sleep?
Yeah. So because if your neck is hurting, you might be in a weird position. And so now the rest of your back may not be straight. So ideally, when you're sleeping, we would like your spine to be horizontal. So if you're sleeping on your side, if I were to look at you, your neck back should be a straight line. And so therefore we put pillows, we put things so that we can get that nice straight line. A lot of times your hips, your knees will come together. And when your knees come together, it pulls on your hips. So we like to put a pillow between the knees. So that way, when I look at your hip and knee, it should be on the same level. So there's a big pillow between your knees if you're sleeping on your side, and that will help with your hip and back pain as well in that way.
I have a condition that makes me feel cold all the time, to wear more or have thicker blanket. What is the issue? How could that be corrected?
Yes. The one thing to check is thyroid. So if your thyroid is low, so that's right here, the thyroid gland. If that's low, then you will feel cold. You might be constipated. You might have hair loss, those kinds of things. So that's a very quick test. It's a simple blood test for thyroid. If your thyroid is okay, then we worry about circulation. So let's say it's only your feet. Then we want to check, is the circulation going down to your feet? Now, if you're an older person, we worry about blocked arteries going down there. And there's an ultrasound that you can do to check for that. If you're a younger person, it's unlikely that you have blocked arteries. It just means that the pipes are tightening up at night when you're not moving around. So in that situation, move your feet around, right? So as soon as you move your feet around, then the muscles have to work, and then the blood flow is going to increase to the leg, and you'll get more warmth in that particular way.
What are some good exercises for sciatica?
Sciatica is interesting. So sciatica is basically where the disc, remember the bone, and there's a disc. The disc is pushed out and it's touching the wires. So because it's touching the wires, then you get a leg pain that goes all the way down. The sciatic nerve is the big nerve on the back of your leg that goes all the way down to your toes. So a lot of people will say, yeah, I get this pain going all the way down to my toe, and that's sciatica. You're pinching that nerve. So very good exercises is back to lying in the bed again, right? So if we vertical, it's going to press down. So whereas if you lie on your side, there's no compression forces. So lying on your back, pulling up your knees, okay, towards your chest, that will stretch out the bum muscles. So the bum muscles will not tighten up and therefore cause your back to spasm more. So everything's about stretching your leg muscles. So pull your legs up to your chest, maybe cross your knees over to the other side so that you're again stretching the muscles. And all of this you can do while you're lying in the bed. And I think those would be very simple exercises that we can do. You can also strengthen your legs in the bed. So you can do your toe actions and everything else in the bed as well. But horizontal is a good way to take off the pressure from the disc.
I find that actually very good for me after a long walk when you're tired. It's very good for relax the muscles after that.
Agree. Yeah. Agree. Yeah. And remember, when you're sitting on a computer, the muscles are working. They're working very hard. And because you're not moving, they're staying like this all the time. In nature, animals do not sit like this in one position, right? They're moving. So therefore, the muscle is moving. And what's good about muscles moving is that when they're on, they're tight. They don't get any blood flow. But then when they relax, then they get blood flow. But in you and I, when we sit there at a computer, everything is tight for 10 hours. So the blood flow into those muscles is not very good. And that's why you get that burning feeling in the muscles, because it's not getting enough blood supply. So that's why it's good to look at the computer, then look at the sky, look out the window, move your back around, go a little sideways. And that allows all the muscles to relax and then get blood flow. And then we can use them again. And then 10 minutes later, look around, give them relaxation, get blood flow, and then you can do that over and over again.
In the anti-aging area there, I was giving a few names, if you could quickly comment on them. Resveratrol.
Resveratrol, yeah. So that's supposed to be an anti-aging. It's from grapes and stuff like that. So there are some studies saying that perhaps it is helpful. But again, we don't know how much, what happens in 5 years when you keep taking it. So that's the problem with these sort of things that we discover now. How do we know that it's safe to take for 10 years, for example, right? So whereas that's why I look at the people that live in those blue zones, right? Pills, nothing fancy, no alcohol, just no smoking. They lead a very simple life. They're not rich people. So it's not that they bought their health. And if you read about them, you'll realize that there's no magic, right? So in other words, there's no magical pill that you have to take or anything like that. They just lead a very good life where they're moving around all the time, purposeful, like we talked about. So there is no need to take a special elixir or a special drink or a special herb or a special pill of any sort. And like I said, they don't go and exercise. There's no gym there. There's no running around like that. They just are busy during the day.
So we'll have one or two last questions. How should we pay attention to our diet in order to lower bad cholesterol and reduce blood sugar?
Yeah, so generally speaking, the more processed the food, the easier it is to get everything. So when we say processed food, for example, if you look at white bread, so what we did was we take the grain, we get rid of the husk, we grind the inside into a fine powder, and then we fluff it up. So you can imagine that you're going to get the sugar very quickly from that. So the sugar is going to come into your body really fast. And now your body has to deal with all this sugar coming in. That's going to be harder on the pancreas, easier to have diabetes problems. On the other hand, if you look at the rye bread with the seeds on it, right? It needs processing. Your body has to process and grind it up and digest. So it's going to take you a lot longer. So therefore, your extraction of the nutrients is lower. So therefore, it's a better food to eat. So in other words, the more processed it is, the easier it is to get the calories out of it. So for example, cheese, we take this much milk and then we make this much cheese, tiny little bit. I could eat that cheese and I'll get all the calories from this much milk. And so again, concentrated food, very easy to get. So we want to avoid those things. So that's why they say eat less processed food, because the processing makes it easier for us to access the nutrients. We now want to make it harder to access the nutrients. We want your body to work at it. So yes, you can eat 2 pieces of brown bread because it's going to take your body a lot of time to actually get the nutrients out of it. So we don't want very quick and easy foods. So sugar, candy, those are quick energy, which is too easy for your body to get in. So look at foods that are not processed, and then you'll be able to eat more of it without getting all the calories coming in.
Right. Our last question is about jogging, slow jogging. Let's see, 7.5 minutes per kilo.
Yeah.
km. Would that be bad for knees?
Any jogging is bad on knees because your whole weight is going on one leg at one point, right? So there's always a striking portion of it. It's not as bad as sprinting. Sprinting is very bad because there's a lot of pressures on your knees. Running upstairs is very hard on your knees as well, because each time on the step, your knee has to generate a lot of pressure to push your body up. So therefore, if you look at, again, back to the blue zone people, none of them are running. You don't see them running 10 miles a day or anything like that. They're just moving around, and they do quite well. And in fact, there are some studies that said people that run heavily, they do tend to have more arthritis in their knees just because of wear and tear. And so that's why I think we just let's not push our system too hard. And remember, in nature, when we run, it's running for food or running for our life. So it's very short. We don't run for an hour, in nature. So I'm not trying to make us lazy. I'm trying to make us not stress our system out. And you can imagine that running is like a sign of danger, right? I have to get out of there. So it should be only on for a short period of time. Whereas walking is okay. Whereas moving around like these blue zone people are doing is okay. They're not running anywhere. They're not, doing 10-mile marathons or anything like that. So maybe we should rethink, what we're doing in terms of our exercise as well.
Right, that would be our last question. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for this very educational and helpful seminar. We do have